Okay, well, welcome to the Flipform Think Tank. My name is JP Garcia here today with Jonathan Hamlin, and today is the first day that we are actually doing a Curiosity Sparks podcast, right? So we're hosting it here on the Flipform Think Tank, but really this is the brainchild of Jonathan here. So I guess the first thing I want to do, just introduce you to my folks, who are listening here. Just tell them about yourself, Jonathan.
So I always like to start and say, I'm Jonathan Hamlin, who is a person driven and interested in helping other people find their choice and who they want to be as leaders. And so I use my background with, 15 plus years in oil and gas, energy, some food and commercial backgrounds, public speaking backgrounds to try to lift others up in that format. That's my goal. Use all of these experiences, as someone who's gone through and got the bruises and the bumps to really help other people lift up. And get to that next level, because it's a big difference. Like I said to you before, you can read a lot of great posts online and you can read a lot of great things, but how do you use them?
Right.
And so that's who I am. I'm a person who likes to help people turn great thoughts and ideas into tools and action.
Okay. Yeah, no, I love it. And I think the listeners for my show will really resonate with some of the ideas that you have. I mean, we talked about the framework that you had for, your thoughts with your newsletter, and maybe launching, this show in more of a regular format. And I think that, just what we talked about, just foreshadowing a little bit, I think that, the stuff dealing with, employee relations, personal growth, corporate growth, growing cultures, these types of things, paired with the folks that I think you could bring on that we discussed, I think it'd be really interesting for everybody, because a lot of folks who are listening to this show are professionals who are just, looking to help improve themselves, maybe launch their own, careers as an entrepreneur, or even just enhance their workspace, professionally. Right. So, a lot of this content will translate over whether you're doing your own business or whether you're working for someone, a larger company. So I think we should just dig right into it. Right. So today, What were you wanting to talk about today?
I wanted to start with something really foundational for people, and it's under the umbrella of building an employee or building your team in a development, but building the whole person. There's a big difference in harvesting things from employees and not worrying or not caring.
Yeah.
Or saying that you do, but how do you actually care about them? How do you actually get them to the next level of their life? And I like to tell people there's a big difference between harvesting from your employees or getting them to the next level of their life and then letting that work feed back to the company that you're in. It's a big difference, right? It's what's the foundation of a good employee or a good team member? And always start by asking people, what are you looking for? What's the basics that you're looking for? What kind of team are you trying to build? Are you trying to build the best? Are you trying to build better than the best? Like where are you going? Because if you go with conventional, everyone's really just trying to hit a baseline. Like who doesn't? Like everyone wants, no one really actually wants to be weird, but they want the weird person's results.
Right. Yeah.
You want non-conventional results, but you don't want to have to go down the non-conventional pain points.
Right.
And there's a pretty big difference there. And so if you start back at the basics, what is it? What are these ideal attributes? What are the steps to go into it? And so one of the things I like to talk about is, first off, you just have to start by identifying what kind of results you want in your team. Pick that direction.
Okay.
Right? Pick the direction you want to go, and then start with each individual. Each person is bringing something to the table.
Right.
Each person walked into that office today, or maybe it's not an office. I worked in the food industry. These people come in, they're coming in to run a shift. Each person walked in with something and experienced something before they walked in. And unfortunately, they brought that to work.
Right.
Even when you don't want them to bring it to work.
Right.
And so how do you start your day or start your shift or start anything with these employees if you don't have the space for them to actually make the transition, right? And some of that is foundational of understanding what kind of employees you have, what are they going through. But you have to focus on that person and see them with a really big, clear lens of empathy.
Yeah.
Which, always like to talk about the difference between empathy and sympathy. I just had this explanation the other day with a 13-year-old, saying, I wish people were, just give me some sympathy. It's like, you don't want sympathy.
Right.
You want empathy.
Mhm.
Sympathy is you see someone holding something that's crushing them, you end up feeling sympathetic for them. You end up under there being crushed with them.
Right.
Versus the empathy, I know you've heard this definition, is understanding what they need and trying to help them out of it and give them the tools to get out from being crushed.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the first step. If you see your employees coming in and you're looking at it with the lens of empathy, you've taken that first step, which is a hard thing to do
Mhm.
because anyone who's been in a leadership position is being pressed for deliverables.
Correct. Yeah.
You've never signed a contract and they said, hey, just build my team and help my team be better.
Right.
They've signed a contract with you and they said, here's your deliverables. Here's where you can invoice me.
Yeah.
Here's where you can get paid.
Well, I mean, that's, if you really distill it down, right? And maybe this is a little bit of a jaded view, but like a client or an employer, they're not gonna give you a team, or they're not gonna pay for a team unless you need the team, right? Because they want to do it. The corporation has goals and they want to do that with the lowest cost possible, but with the highest quality possible, right? And if they knew that they could just hire you and you could just do everything, then clearly they're not going to fund a team for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, to that end, okay, well, you're right. They give you a team because you have a very large thing to accomplish. And so it's, I mean, and they really don't care. They don't care the method. While sometimes people say, I think they try to project that there are certain things that they want to happen, and a lot of that may be true. At the end of the day, they paid you, right? Whether you're a salary person or you're a contractor, to do a thing, and they just want that thing to be done, and they don't want to have to think about it anymore.
That's right.
Right. And I've seen it in corporations, and I don't know if you have either, where you have different disparate teams around the corporation that do things differently. And it's really this kind of autonomy of, autonomy of self-governance that says, okay, again, I don't care how you do it. I just need you to do it this way.
That's right.
So going back to your very initial point, how do you set that team dynamic? How do you set that team culture? Right. I think thinking about it in the very beginning is super important. How much do you think that the personnel play into that, right? Because you could have a plan. Okay, I want this to be a really open, a really collaborative team, and then the team members come on and, maybe that team won't gravitate towards being completely open. Not all of them are wired that way, right?
Very accurate.
So
yeah.
Then, what do you do? How do you manage that?
I think we're talking about the perfect example, right? Is you've been given something to run, to lead. So we could go down this rabbit hole of all the false things about being a leader that they tell you that are great, that are really horrible.
Sure.
We should come back to that.
Yeah, that's a whole show. Yeah.
Do a whole episode.
It's probably a week. It's probably a week of 1 hour shows.
The lies of leadership. That's what it's going to be called. Okay. Yeah. The lies of leadership. But you get handed this team. Most people, when they're put in a leadership position, don't get to pick their team. It's super rare, right?
Correct.
You get handed a team and you say execute. And I think that's part of the issue right there is if you're not going into it, kind of like I said, with that empathetic lens to start with, and saying, okay, first off, I need to understand who they are, where they are. There's a difference of understanding where someone's at in their life and in their position versus where you want them to be. Right. Because if you come in with the lens of, look, I need you to do X, and I need you to do X by this time, and these are how the deliverables have to come out, versus if you start by understanding where they are, then you can actually build the real plan. So you start off with your plan of where you want to go. That's like a directional business execution strategy. There's a difference between that and the execution strategy of how I'm going to build this team and get them to connect. And I can tell you, I have this story that sits in my mind, and it's so interesting to me. I was given a team to work with when I went into one of my roles, and there was this coordinator that was working with us, and I sat with this person and I'm talking to them saying, listen, I get that this is happening. We'll make this okay. It's a mistake. It's fine. And that person was super worried about basically covering their tail, that they weren't going to get burned and they weren't going to have, these things fall back on them. And I stopped and I said to that person, I said, your success and your growth as a person in this team is the most important part for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a project. We're going to have more projects.
Right.
This is the definition. This is not, no one's going to die on this project.
Correct.
Type of conversation. And I'll never forget when that person looked at me and just said, you know what? I don't believe you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things where, which is why later on we'll get into culture and we'll talk about that. But it made it very clear that to understand where this person is, we need to go back and start talking about what are the thought drivers here? What's
Mm-hmm.
driving your thoughts here? How are you looking at the decisions that get given to you in a day? How do we reset the tools for this individual so that they can see that this is not that team,
Right.
and I am not the leader or the team member or the partner, that's going to work with you, that's going to treat any of these interactions this way.
Right.
I mean, because that's a pretty harsh story, of
Mm-hmm.
truth. Like that happened, and I scratch my head so often because I've had so many of those conversations where, I've literally had people stand in front of me and I've had to reverse some of these things that are built into them to the fact of, what happens when you make a mistake, and have them repeat back to me in the most fundamental way. If I make a mistake, I will not get fired.
Right.
But believe it or not, that's what I would say. I'd start there, start finding where your employees are, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were given a team. There's so many times where I was given a team where somebody wanted the job I was in. They felt they should have had it. So you have to go and sit down and have that type of breakdown with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get it. You wanted this role. What's most important is if you want this role, because I don't plan to die in this role, I will help you get there.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the gaps, because there's some reasons they didn't choose you.
Right.
Let's figure those out. I don't know what they are generally. You maybe the next person will. Then you have the people who have been underappreciated, overworked.
Yeah.
Then you have the people who, no one's seen their talent. No one has really realized that here's an ace everyone thinks is a C player, but this person's an A+ player.
Right.
And they've just actually never been given an on-ramp to get to that level.
Yeah.
And so that's why I start with finding where they are. And then I build that game plan of execution for them. Yeah. And then I lay that out for them. Mm-hmm. And you can do it in a one-on-one session. That's one thing, but it's actually more powerful. This is my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts, countermeasures on this. But actually, if you can lay out that execution for everyone's growth in a sit down with everyone, you start to see something happen. Because in my experience, what ends up happening is you're actually lowering the barrier of the walls that people put up between themselves of this is my job and I need to protect my job. Yeah. You lower that wall and they start to see, you know what? Wait a minute. Oh, you want to grow too? Wait. Oh, you have some goals here too that are not just like to survive till 5 o'clock. You actually want to be better. Right. And so when they start to see that and you lower those walls as a team, then everybody starts to say, okay, I need help, but they need help. Right. And that's when that giver mentality starts. That's a seed for a giver mentality inside of the team. That if you don't have that setting and you don't make that step, which is, you got to be brave, right? You got to lean into the uncomfortable. That's not a comfortable situation for most teams. And that people call it like the soft stuff. And I don't really want to get emotional and I don't want to talk about these things, but it's not an emotional thing. Yeah. There's not a human being on this world who doesn't have some form of an aspiration.
Right. Right. Well, and it's the thing that I've always noticed is that it's hard for people to be truly honest at work. Is that spicy to say?
It's the right thing to say.
It takes a long time for people to have what I call happy hour conversation. Right?
Yeah. And there's a big difference between, you say happy hour. So when you say happy hour, I think of liquid courage.
Correct. But that's the sentiment, right? It's that people wouldn't normally say the things, within the construct of the 8 to 5 or whatever, that they would say with liquid courage at happy hour after work, after 3 years of working with them.
True.
Does that make sense? So they're not going to confide in you what they really think until that time. And so to me, well, at least my experience has been, what can I do as a manager? What can I do as a leader to break that down, to compress that time frame, to understand that, to get my team members to understand that, hey, I'm here with you. Yeah. I'm not the enemy, right? And so, I can think of one one team in particular who I came in contact with that it was very, when I came in as their supervisor, right? They all came from different backgrounds. It was the first time they were doing very kind of large consulting work, right? And so this is maybe consulting centric, but I think the ideas kind of transcend just that particular
themes or
thing,
teams, right?
Right. So they saw me as, and it's all perception, right? I was hired. This was just the first job that I took in Lafayette. I was hired from a Houston-based consulting firm. Okay. And so for me, I came into work, that day, and I had interview in what I thought was a normal business casual thing. And I only know this because I got feedback from that team later of why they were so off put by me in the very beginning, and they had, their own culture of dress. And it seems like nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I came in, sport coat, button down, slacks, nice shoes, right? And so for me, coming from the world that I came from, it's like, okay, well, I'm not wearing a tie, right? It's good,
That was the relaxed version of JP.
That was the relaxed version of client-facing JP at that time, right? Not that I wouldn't want to wear, jeans and a polo. I didn't realize that the corporate culture around that had been jeans and a polo, and I came in what looked like a real suit, and I was older, right, than the team, and so they just all the bells and when, because a lot of those folks had worked in service industry, you're going through school and stuff like that, and so they had this really different idea of what supervisor employee relationship was like, right? Whether that's correct or not correct, right? That's the perception that they had, right? It's first or second job out of school, first job in consulting. They're just really a supervisor. They had their own definition of what that was, right? Yeah. And I had to realize what that was and break down that definition and change it. It's like, this may be your definition of what a supervisor is, and this is what mine is. Like, I'm not here to micromanage you. I'm not here to try to play gotcha and find all the wrong things that you're going to do. I don't have time for that. I got stuff that I need to do. Yeah. Right. I basically need to sell you as a team. Right. So I need you guys to get, we need to understand what you guys need to do, your strengths, your weaknesses, so that I can fix them, or we can get somebody else to fix them. And then now we have this team and we're going to go forward. And it was one-on-ones, like you say. It was team breakfasts, a lot of team breakfasts, it was commiserating on shared problems and showing that, like, hey, I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. You have strengths, I have strengths, and we all need to figure out what it is. Right. And it was really within that first evaluation cycle when, they performance reviews and stuff like that. Yeah. Right. So I had to have the conversations about, okay, well, what does this mean? Whatever. Right. So beforehand, I had conversations with them. Okay. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Right. And you have this conversation and it seems like the right thing to do. You'll see LinkedIn posts like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to talk to them, blah, 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 blah. Right. Yeah. And you're always going to get the same answer.
Oh yeah.
They are going to answer knee-jerk reaction. They're going to answer whatever the next level of progression is. It doesn't matter what they actually want to do or not. Right. Mm-hmm. And to be able to dig into, to be able to break down that wall is so tough because they feel like, again, it's like school or it's like their parents. Somebody's trying to play gotcha with them. It's like, you have the wrong answer. And, and they're on their toes all the time. And to be able to break that down and to say, look, like kind of like what you did, or you were talking about where you have people around them that wanted your job, he's like, come into the place. Do you want to do what I do? Because if you want to do what I do, then I need to have you on the project do these things or whatever. And then you outline how you're going to get them to that level, right? And it's like, if you don't want to do what I do and you want to do this other thing, then I need to get you with these other people and I can do all of that, but you got to tell me, you know, and I need to put you in positions. The freedom that I have as the team lead is that I can put you in positions to get to where you want to go. You just got to tell me.
Yeah.
Right. And, and it was one of these things where until they realize that, like, and then you have to back it up with action. Right.
Of course.
And then you see them do this, right? And then you put them in a position of, okay, leadership. Okay. I need you to run this little work stream for me or do whatever it is you do. Mm-hmm. And then you follow it up with praise to their management, essentially, your management or whoever it is, okay, hey, Christina did this thing and she did great and boom, here it is. And this is the outcome. And then you on the back end, you say, if they need feedback, because they probably will, always. Right? So you make it public. Okay, here's the feedback that she did great. Here are the things that she needs. Can you guys provide this person resources? So then now you are seen as this person, not necessarily as their supervisor or their team lead, but you're the person that can help them get to where they want to go. And you make yourself a tool to them,
right,
by doing that kind of stuff.
And I think we're circling the wagon around like a really big topic of, it starts with that communication, right? Mm-hmm. And giving them the tools to communicate, because going back a few steps to what you said about the courage to say things that they would say at a happy hour or after 3 years of working there, building up a level of trust. It's one thing when you come in to think about how you're going to communicate, which I would say, let's come back to that on executive presence, mm-hmm. because there's some false visions of what executive presence should be.
Right.
But you also have to, in that, set them up with here's the realm of communication we live in. Mm-hmm. And here's how communication between the two of us will work. This is how I communicate. I think any leader who steps into a team that doesn't actually show a communication matrix for them of, this is the frequency I like to say what I'm going to tell you, or how I like to break down the vision of where we're going. Mm-hmm. This is how I like to be spoken to. This is how I like to speak to you guys.
Right.
Coming in there and saying, I am not going to sit on some pedestal and expect for you guys to only talk to me via email. I expect you guys to come and talk to me when there's an issue. Yep. If you and I like to use this as an old principle from the CEO of WD-40 years ago, is if you think I should know, you should tell me. And if you think you should know, you should ask.
Right.
Like, that is just the basis of a very clear communication line between you and anyone, but much less a new team member, a new leader.
Yep.
In a role there, right?
Absolutely.
So if you give the outline of a matrix of communication, it can kind of set the rules for them. Mm-hmm. Because in that rule setting, I had to use it as well, because I had this team member who was a little too comfortable. Mm-hmm. Like, when we talk about having open lines of communication, a lot of people think, going back to what I said earlier, I think it's this warm fuzzy thing. But there was this person that wanted to tell me way more than I wanted to know. And,
right.
I'm like a cat, like trying to get out of water, right? Yeah. I'm just trying my hardest. And I really had to go back and say, okay, listen, we talked about these lines. We talked about this framework of communication. And, if we were one-on-one at a happy hour, then I can spend time doing this. But we can't spend time literally talking about your cats.
Right.
Like, we can't spend time literally talking about the type of grass you're growing in your yard and, the seed, this difference between the seeds. Like, I can't devote that much time to you on these topics. Now, if you need to talk to me about a death in the family, because it's affecting how you're working, let's talk about that. Like, I will make space. I'll sit on the floor. I'll crisscross on the floor with you. You need to cry? Let's get it out. You know, like, having the ability to do that. And going back to what I said about executive presence, that's exactly what you said. So you come in and you're dressed this way, right? So you are perceived a certain way. And I have always been that guy. Like, when I come in, people think, oh, he's corporate. Like, he's the guy. Because I was the same in many of the roles. I'm coming in and I'm wearing normal business attire.
Right.
My first job out of college was raising canes. I was frying chicken. Okay. I was in jeans and a polo. And that's the only way you knew I was a manager.
Right.
Right. Which,
you had the polo.
Oh, I still have them. It's if they fit, that would be a different story.
Well, there you go. Well, maybe you had too much canes.
First world problems, man.
There you go.
First world problems.
Hey, canes is good. Canes is good.
And then my next role, it was at a Fortune 500 company, and everybody's button downs, just like you, slacks, sports coats for this. You go to this type of event, it's a suit, no questions asked. It's not about, dress smart. It's about, you make sure you are not the only guy without a sports coat type of company.
Yeah.
And so one of the roles that I stepped into later in life, I'm taking over a coating facility and I'm in slacks and a button down, and they didn't. What was interesting is in your executive presence, you can have the mindset where you can show them. You don't have to just tell them. You can show them. There's a piece of communication in that executive presence that's talking these things, but walking these things.
Mm-hmm.
So when they see me throw on steel toe boots, put the vest on, put the hard hat on, grab my gloves, got all the PPE.
Yeah.
Just make that asterisk. I was wearing all the PPE, and I get in the line and I start turning the wrenches and I start adjusting tires and motors. There's a difference there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing about when I say find them where they are, you're also meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
So you're getting yourself to that level. And I think it's important. I'm not telling you that every leader has to go out and master every trade or every piece that's in that puzzle. But there's a very, very different connection when you say, okay, let's talk about it from a spreadsheet perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Take what they're working on that they're struggling with and go find.
Mm-hmm.
Go find, can you do it? Can you solve this problem? Have you crossed this problem? And show them, hey, look, this is something that I would do, or this is how I tried. I didn't get that answer.
Yeah.
But if I do it this way, I get the answer. Will this work for you? It's just connecting a bridge in a very different way.
Sure.
I had this one guy one time, I needed some information from him. It was critical. It was a very tight deadline. I call him. I'm in the middle of something. I can't come right now. There's a problem at his site, whatever he's working on. Okay. I'm on my way. And that was the biggest thing to him, is that I went to him when everyone else in that situation waits for him to come to them because they won't leave their office.
Yeah.
And it's to this day, he'll still say, I still could remember that day. Mm-hmm. You needed something from me, but I was busy. And you came to me. You offered to help me.
Right.
Like that's a big deal. People overlook that portion of, well, what would I want in that situation? If I were in his shoes, what would I want?
Right.
Would I want someone telling me I have to stop solving problem this to go over here and feed you numbers for your report to send up the ladder? Or would some help be great?
Yeah.
Well,
I think part of it too is there's two things, right? There's an aspect of when you get into a leadership role, one thing that I think you have to have that not a lot of people seem to show, at least in the beginning, is a real good sense of self-awareness, right?
True.
And it is not just, it's not what you think, or maybe what you think when you hear self-awareness, but part of it is understanding what your weaknesses are, understanding what your strengths are, understanding your communication preferences, understanding your, other preferences. Just, you may like to have a clean desk. If you look around, I don't have clean desks, right? But these are these types of things, and you just have to know as a manager, as a supervisor, as a VP, as a director, you have to know what these things are. Why? Because if you have the self-awareness to know what makes you as a person operate in the best manner, in the most efficient manner, then you can communicate that, right? At one level, yes, when you said that you need to be able to communicate to your folks that, hey, I need you to email me like this, or you have a comms plan basically for your team, is what you were getting at. Mm-hmm. Part of it is understanding okay, hey, I tell my people, look, if you need something imminently, come to the desk, right? Don't send me an email or send me a text or don't send me a text. If you need to talk to me, call me or stand here. And I'm not going to be offended. I don't if I have my own office, it's like, I don't care. The only time I'm going to close the door is if I'm talking to somebody that you can't walk in. If the door is open, it's as if there are no doors, right?
That's right.
There's no walls. So that's for me. Other people are different, but having that self-awareness is one thing, because then you can communicate your strengths, your weaknesses, your preferences. The other thing, and that you were getting at here too, is having a sense or being able to develop a sense for awareness of others and what their needs are. And because a lot of times, some of these folks who are not in leadership positions yet, or maybe they don't even aspire to be in leadership positions, they don't have this self-awareness that, that other people may have. And as a leader and as a team lead or, whatever leadership position you have to know your people. And I could tell you XYZ person, he's real quiet. He doesn't, he'll respond to email almost immediately, but if you go over and talk to him, he'll shut down. He doesn't look you in the eye. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a thing where he doesn't like to be in front of people. So let's not let him be the one presenting today.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's let him be in the back running the scene. That's his mode. And if he tells me that he wants to grow, then that's a different thing.
That's right.
Right. But you have to know your people. And, for the person you went out into the field to meet, that's something that you would know. It's like, okay, if he needs something, he's not going to be able to come and do what I'm asking him to do. So that means that he needs me to go out there and help him. Right. Versus another person, same job, if you go out there to help them, they may feel insulted that, oh gosh,
right.
he doesn't think I can do this. He's going to try to supervise me. He's going to try to beat me over the head with process and procedure and blah, blah, blah. And,
Or just be a seagull.
Exactly.
The famous seagull, fly in, drop on you and leave.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, because you called it a comm plan, right? I call it a communication matrix.
Right.
But we're saying the same thing, right? As usual. Industries upon industries, so many different acronyms, many different names for things, but we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And you even mentioned feedback. I wrote it down right here so I wouldn't forget. That's part of it too, right? Like, so you're saying, this is how I'm going to communicate. These are the rules of how I expect communication to go.
Right.
I think that's too what you said has always been part of mine. Same scenario. Yeah. Guys, I get it. It's easy to send an email. I've got a teenage daughter. I know text messaging is easy.
Right.
But for the love of God, just call me.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I'll show them my personal inbox. Like, okay, there are 50,000 messages here dating back to 2012.
50.
If I haven't answered it by 2012, look, you may be in that pile, right?
That's right.
So, and there's rhyme and reason, right? A lot of it's spam, let's be honest. But point is that for me, that's email. It's like email is almost like a company-wide announcement, in a lot of senses. It's just like, okay, I know what that is. Unless it's addressed to me specifically, then it's like, then it gets second priority because everybody has enough email that they have to answer that address directly to you or emails that you have to send that you're waiting on. I mean, people put blinders on even if they don't want to, right?
Yep.
And you just have to know, again, it goes back to self-awareness. You just have to know that like, hey, I don't keep a clean inbox, or maybe I do. I keep a clean inbox. If you email me, I'm going to do X, Y, Z immediately just so I can get it off of my plate. Whatever it is, you just have to be able to communicate that to your people.
That's right.
And also have a thick skin. The other thing is have a thick skin, because when you start to invite feedback, you don't know what's coming back. Right. But you got to welcome it. It's like, okay, one of the things that I do, and it's something that came from the Agile world. I don't know how familiar you are with Agile, right? But I really love the concept of the retrospective in Agile, right? And the retrospective is basically, without digging into the jargon, it's basically where you debrief on the past week or 2 weeks of work that happened, and anything's on the table. What am I trying to say? And in the most politically correct way, anything is on the table. If you think I suck at doing this, you tell me. And then I set that expectation in the beginning. It's like, if you think I'm terrible at this, you need to tell me, and I will swallow that pill because I need to get better at that. And I may not know, and
I always called it the stoning.
Yeah.
The retrospect is the stoning.
Oh man, it is. Well, or a lot of times it can be therapeutic for your team because the other thing that you can use a retrospective for, and this is totally tangent topic, right? But the one thing you can do the retrospective for is you can build your team to be closer by you taking on the stoning of somebody that everybody knows was a problem here. And I'll give an example in a minute. But they either don't feel the psychological safety to make that case, right? So for example, if my boss was the problem, right? Nobody in that retrospective is going to say anything about that, because it's not just their boss, it's their boss's boss, right? There's that,
it's hot water,
inbuilt culture of, I don't say things about that, in a lot of corporations. So if I call it out though, right? Say, hey, you know what? James, man, he really sucked at that. I need to go tell him. And then once you break that seal, then boom, all the, you know what? Yeah, here's what the blah, 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 blah. And then so you start to talk about, okay, well, how do we present it to him? Right? Because he likes this, he doesn't like that. Okay, here's what we're going to say. Boom. And it comes from the team, but it authored from the leader. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then you go to James and say, hey, okay, here's some things. Here's where we fell off the wagon. You know, I'm going to give you this feedback email. This is where it comes from. Okay. So that nobody gets, bent out of shape, but then the changes happen, and ideally nobody gets their feelings hurt too much, except for, a lot of times it's,
the messenger.
The messenger gets to be the pincushion, but that's part of leadership too, right? It's the,
yeah. And
getting punched in the face.
We're throwing the word leadership around. The reality is every member of your team is a leader, right? Like I always say, this is someone I work with. I never say, hey, this guy worked for me.
Yeah.
Or this girl worked for me, or this lady worked for me. I don't know what the politically correct way to say that is, but it's always who I worked with. And so what's interesting there too in that feedback is there's a big difference, right? Like here's feedback for Jonathan. Okay. Hey, Jonathan, you need to start showing up on time because you're always effectively 10 or 15 minutes late.
Right.
Because I was late getting here today.
It's all right.
Right. There's a difference of that delivery and saying, hey, Jonathan, look, you know what? The clients really like it that you show up a little bit early because they're really enjoying the conversations with you.
Right.
So if you could show up even, another 10 minutes earlier, I think they'd really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's the same delivery.
It is. It's ideally the same outcome.
I say same delivery, same outcome potential of what you've said. And so, you said something very critical there to note is how are we going to deliver this message, right? And here's something interesting I read the other day that I think is absolutely brilliant. Okay, so this company starts, they want to change the way feedback is delivered and the way things happen, right? And so if you have this open channel where people can go in and basically pat people on the back and say their name and say the great thing that they did on a year-round basis, if it's always available, it's not important.
Right.
And so this company says, okay, well, we're only going to do this every Friday. We're going to have this Slack or this Teams channel, whatever, that opens up for 30 minutes. That's it. And so everyone gets an opportunity to go in there and say something and lift someone up and say, hey, JP, and they do the whole @ thing, tag you, JP, you crushed it on this project whenever you made this deliverable on time. The customer was pumped, all these things.
Right.
And then that shuts down. And whenever they do tag everyone, those names get entered into a wheel, a rewards wheel. And then they have a meeting that they host right after that every week. And that meeting's only like, it's a true type of EOS meeting. I don't know if you're familiar with those type of things.
No, what's EOS?
Don't quiz me on another acronym right here.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. I'll come back to you on that one.
Okay.
But it's from the book Traction. It's Gino Wickman's book.
Okay. Give me the structure. What do you do?
In EOS, it's all about they have all these different things of how they've run their businesses, right? So they run their 10-minute meetings in a very structured way.
Yeah. Okay.
You have your rocks, your deliverables that you're looking on. They call them rocks.
Okay.
And they only have them for 90 days, and then you reset your rocks.
Okay. Yes.
And it's
Understood.
A very structured meeting. So this company then has one of those 9-minute, 10-minute meetings.
Yeah. They're super effective. Yeah.
And their goal is they turn that 30-minute thing where people only have that window to do it. And if you miss it, you have to wait a whole week. But that becomes the pep rally before the game. Right. And the game is that meeting, and they hit it hard, and they spin the wheel, and they call out who won, and that every week they call out 4 winners from the pep rally, basically, who get a $50 gift card.
Nice,
right? And it was this thing where, okay, when they started this, everybody's looking at it like, this is dumb. What are we?
Yeah.
Are we teenagers? Like, who cares? And then it became this thing where, oh, you called me out. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was so kind of you. And then someone came back, oh, you called me out, man. Thank you. That meant the world to me. Thank you for even noticing. I didn't think anyone cared. And then like this thing just takes off to where now, I mean, they have people who are just, they're waiting. And as soon as it hits in, the things are scrolling through so fast, you almost can't even read them. They're coming through so fast.
Right.
Like you don't even have time to respond because you can't even read.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it took over 8 years for it to get to this. Right. But that's part of the feedback cycle where, you talked about telling the team, hey, this person did really great, or telling upper management, talking them up because that's part of their journey, or maybe that's where they want to go, or you want to help that person be seen. You can do that as the leader, as their supervisor. You can do it as their coworker.
Yeah.
You can do it as someone in another department, just seeing someone. and letting them know they've been seen. It's just a huge thing that people overlook.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a list of people I have to go. I'm past due. I've got to go, finalize some referrals on LinkedIn. Like, it's so easy to go and tell people about how awesome these people are.
Yeah.
And it's something that I try to make time for and go do. Go give the referrals.
Yeah.
Go list out, this person's fantastic at this. If you get an opportunity to work with this person on these type of projects, do it.
Right.
Or on this type of task, or building these type of facilities, or building this type of, like, those are the things, take them. And I think it's a big deal to note that what that feedback's going to look like, right? And there's a tool, I'll bring it out and we'll talk about it in one of these sit downs in the future, of what the feedback circle that I like to use is.
Okay.
And what are the questions, and how do we break down what feedback really is from an accountability standpoint? It's kind of foreshadowing, obviously, because accountability, unfortunately, has a negative context for most people in situations like when they say, how are we going to hold this person accountable?
Right.
It's never a positive. No one's ever like, man, how do we hold this person accountable?
Yeah.
And they're thinking promotion. They're thinking, I'm going to light a fire under somebody here.
Right. Yeah.
So I definitely want to break that down too a little bit there, because I think it's a big piece of what a comms plan or a communication matrix is going to be built upon.
Yeah. No, the one other thought that's swimming around in my head that makes this, that really complicates this for people who are in management leadership positions, so for me, I give you my example, right? When I have teams, I really like to what I call shine them up, right? I will send 50, 100, 1,000 emails shining up my team versus me saying that, oh, hey, I accomplished blah, 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 right?
Right.
It's just my personality, but it served me really well insofar as that my teams will see that I really appreciate them, and I'm not trying to take credit for the work that they've done, right? Because there's a lot of that from the team member standpoint, that people have this perception you're going to try to take credit for what they've done, or, we're going to do all this hard work, but JP is going to be the one who looks good. You know what I mean? The flip side of that is that there are leaders who, again, and it's just a personality thing, that may feel intimidated by letting other people around them shine because it makes them feel like that, hey, it makes me look like I'm not doing anything to add to this team, when in reality, you, the leader, are the person who set the ground and set the table and put all the fences up to allow this team to perform as well as they're doing, right? And a lot of times people's confidence gets rocked by, some of the team members really going out and shining, and the supervisor or whoever doesn't get any sort of recognition in that regard. And and it's normal, right? People want recognition and all those kinds of things.
Human nature, man. That's just a natural human feeling of being left behind, being left out, being unrecognized. Jealousy is a huge one. Pride, a little bit of pride of ownership.
Pride, for sure. And I think that I don't know how to help somebody get over that as a leader. If they're in that leadership position, a lot of times you revert to your natural tendencies of how you deal with people. And if you have this natural tendency, you can't, it's just like taking out an instinct. It's very difficult to work out, a bad habit or whatever, and to help somebody at the leadership level decide that, oh man, I have this hang up where I don't want to praise my team members too much because it's going to make me look bad. That's a personality trait. It's not right or wrong. It's just a thing that I feel like if you're able to, assuage that or get over that somehow, you'll really help your team gel around you.
Oh yeah. For those type of people, because I've obviously run into some of those. You have as well. I wish I could name a company where there's no one who isn't somewhat guarded at times or feels like, this person, they might outshine me. Yeah. I need to protect what I do and how I do it. So one of the frameworks that I've used actually came from an Andy Andrews book. It's not a framework that he lays out. It's just a story that he tells in one of. The book is called The Noticer.
Okay.
Definitely recommended read. But it's the framework is to unpack for that person who is guarded that way, who has a hard time letting his team shine. It is one of those, I love these conversations. I love an uncomfortable conversation with that person, because this framework is something where they get an opportunity to unpack some parts of their life, right? And it's the reverse concept of, let's talk about how you got here. That's what it starts with.
Right.
You know, how'd you get into this role? And how, okay. And like you go backwards. So who helped you, you know, who was your biggest attribute to get you through college? How'd you get, you know, through high school? And maybe it's not that. How'd you get through trade school? Or if it's not school related, you know, how'd you get to success on that project? You did that all by yourself? No one helped you?
Right.
Like you built it? Like you just start asking those questions, and as they start to name the names, you see it. If you have this type of conversation with somebody and you really start to kind of go down, and not from a grilling standpoint, this is one of those things about going back to the type of presence that you have in the conversation,
right? Where
it's like we're sitting here, like, oh, JP, how'd that happen?
Yeah.
Like how did you get that deliverable? You built that program all by yourself. Like just truly be inquisitive of it.
Right.
And you'll see them start naming, no, well, we had to get so-and-so. We had to get so-and-so.
Right.
And then you back it up for them and you say, listen, where you are today, do you think it's fair for those people to be jealous of you? Like, do you think it would be fair for one of them to come in and say that you don't deserve to be here?
Right. Yeah.
Because clearly you deserve to be here. So if we ever hold anyone else back for any reason, we're effectively doing the same thing as someone coming trying to pull that from you or take something from you that you deserve, because you deserve to be here.
Yeah.
That's why you're here. So just go back to that mindset of you can help someone else get to where you are today or beyond. Like my third grade teacher, or let's go back to my kindergarten grade teacher. Well, that's a fun word to say. You know, she's not jealous that I became successful. She's proud.
Right.
She played a role. You know, that's the way I try to get people to think about it. You are essentially, when you are a leader, when we have that conversation about, you know, the lies of leadership, we're going to come back to. I think that's a huge attribute of any leader or meaningful, thoughtful coworkers, is that I'm playing the role of someone who can help you along the journey. Right. The same way that I know I'm going to need help. Yep. Like I didn't get here on my own. You know, like I got here today. I used Google to get here, right? I didn't even get to your studio here on my own. Like I had help. Yeah, you know, absolutely. I don't feel proud. I'm not going to tell everybody I have a natural sense of navigation. Yeah, no, exactly. You know, so it's just a different framework. That's the one that I've used the most. That's been the most relatable, because whenever you start to just get down that conversation, it's super helpful for those people to realize, you know what? Okay, because it's easy. Pride is easy. We often forget. I actually found in my career, it was a great awakening when someone reminded me that you're not as good as you think you are. Yeah. I have a nephew who just signed with college to go be a pitcher.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, nice.
And at one of his tryouts, one of the coaches said to him, and I thought this was brilliant. He said, kind of have a little strut to you, a little swagger as you come off that mound. You think you're something. You're not. Like he just hit him just like that. Yeah. You're not. You know, it's kind of what I call a flick on the nose. You know, like you get flicked. Like it makes you take a step back. It makes you blink a few times. I think every person needs that as a part of their career, and you need that from your team members. One of the conversations that we're going to have here, I think in the future too, needs to be around the dissenters in your group, the dissenters in your teams. Yeah. You know, as we go back and we come back to having those table setting conversations of how we lower the walls. Yeah. And unpack that further, I think it's important to talk about the different players at the table and how critical it is, because a lot of people, they really think when they step into a leadership role or they're joining a team that the people who don't agree with the ideas and have all these questions and feel like we could be going in the wrong way are slowing us down and they're the problems. But the foreshadow for that one is to say that maybe they actually are one of the most critical roles in any successful team. Yeah. You know? Yeah.
You know, it brings up a point that was made outside in a different, the Joe Rogan podcast, right? Joe Rogan has this idea of, or this concept where a person gets too married to their ideas, right? Yeah. And they feel like their ideas define them. And it's a really good take because he's basically saying your ideas are just ideas. It's just like, anything else. It's like the weather patterns or something like that, right? It's influenced by your environment, but it's not necessarily any one thing that you can define your life on, because how many ideas do you have during the day, right? There are a million, 95% of them you forget as soon as you have them, right?
Oh, that's true. That's so true.
Well, yeah, and it gets worse as we get older, right? But
I had to take notes as you were talking so I could remember.
Yeah, no. Well, you need some more mushroom coffee, my friend. That's it. No, but this, you see it in corporate all the time, right? A lot less so. Well, I shouldn't say a lot less so. I think it's less pronounced in consulting, but in corporate for sure. People get so married to their ideas that they feel like that they need to have this defining moment where I had just a speck of brilliance at this right time, and they're going to die just defending this idea, where it's like, hey, it may not be the best thing, it sounds really good, but let's work on it,
I heard something the other day I have a 3-year-old, and anything that happened in the past, it was last week.
Yeah.
It happened yesterday. Last week you did this. So I'm saying the other day, and it was probably a year or two ago. I don't know. Like I said, I should have wrote it down. But
yeah,
it was the fact that if you are pitching your idea, and let's just say we were having a session right here and we're trying to come up with a game plan or solve a problem. If you pitch your idea and then you keep pitching it again and again, you're no longer actually trying to solve the problem.
Right.
You're a lobbyist.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And once I kind of digested that and unpacked it several times, it even changed how, from a consulting standpoint, when I was on the consulting projects, because I still do a little bit of that, but it also changed how I would look at the team that I'm on now with the company I work with, about, because we have these sessions. I state my idea and I let it fall. Let's see where it happens. If someone likes it, great. If we want to circle back to it, it's on the board.
Right.
I don't need to keep saying, yeah, but that's why I said this, or that's why I think this, because that idea doesn't define any of us, right?
Right.
Like you're saying, we're going to have hundreds of them. And I think that's very interesting. It's very interesting conversations around that, because once I started realizing that I should only state my ideas once, it actually did one of the things that I talk about all the time. It forced me to listen more.
Right.
That's that old saying, we have one mouth and 2 ears for a reason.
Yeah.
So we should be listening twice as much as we speak. It actually supports that in a very big way. No, we're not defined by our idea. And the truth is, if your idea is the best, it'll get chosen. And even if it is the best and it doesn't get chosen, who cares?
It doesn't matter. Well, and then now you get into the whole, we're devolving here, but the idea that the strategy is what is key to the success, right? And you see, it's an anecdote that you hear now all the time, at least in the circles that I run in. You can have a B+ or a C grade strategy, but if your execution and your implementation is A+, you're going to be fine.
That's right.
Right? But if you have an A+ strategy, but you have poor execution, right? Or average execution, you're just going to be average, And so to your point, the idea, okay, yeah, you may have had the best idea and it didn't get picked for whatever reason. But the next best idea got chosen. The point is, if you execute that properly and to the best of your ability, and and everybody buys into it and the team really works hard at it, then you're still going to have a greater outcome than if you had, the A+ idea, but nobody got behind it.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. As you're describing that, I always think of this in my mind, the lions and the lambs. An army of lions led by a lamb will be defeated every time. And an army of lambs led by a lion can still win. Yeah. I don't like the saying that it will win. It can win. I mean, it's lambs.
Right. Well, but I mean, but the point is fair.
The point is fair. And it's the same scenario. I had a great lesson from a prior boss of mine. It was about that. It's that, you might have a B+ or a B- player even in your team, the cost of replacing them, the time spent, the investment.
Mhm.
Are you going to replace them with an A+ player? You might think you can.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't. But more importantly, is it's all the things that surround that person.
Yeah.
Or even that team. Because you might, like you said, maybe the plan is an A+, but the team is a C-.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if you're not going to change all of the supporting factors, all of the tools,
Yeah.
the subsets, it really doesn't matter.
But that brings up a point that I've seen on LinkedIn a lot lately. I don't know if you follow Gary Vaynerchuk.
Of course.
Yeah. So Gary V, right?
Should we curse like he does? Would that spice this?
Well, yeah. We could if the kids weren't upstairs. But Gary V, he's been putting out a lot of content lately that says that, if you have a C+ skills player, but they have an A+ personality, you keep that person all day long versus having the A+ talent who has a C+ personality, right?
Exactly.
Because they could torpedo your whole operation by being a sour apple or sour grape or whatever the thing is, right? To be able to have to handle a really awful personality in your team just because they're great at a certain thing, that's a very difficult thing to overcome, because it completely changes the way that everybody interacts with that person, right? And the team dynamics get completely out of whack.
When you have a situation where you have an employee or a team member or a coworker where you feel like you have to mentally prepare yourself to walk into the room with them.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I got to go talk to this person. Let me put my gloves on, my earplugs in, my safety glasses on, because it's just going to be a fest of throwing,
right,
digs and snipes at people. Like that's what it is. That's what we're talking about. You are setting yourself up as a team, as a company, as an organization to just drive everyone down. That's that thing. What's interesting is we always said we are the sum of the 5 people we keep around us, right? Everyone loves to talk about that. But there's been studies that show that it's more like golf. Okay. I don't know if you've ever played golf.
Not well. No.
I didn't ask if you could play golf well. It's like,
I think I've completed 18 holes 3 times in my life. Not often. Yeah. We go to Top Golf for what it's worth.
Heck yeah.
But not real golf.
Yeah. Well, I don't like to devote 4 hours of my day away from my family either. So,
sure.
But in golf, it's very common that when you play, if you have an ace player and he plays with someone who's got like, a 40 handicap, that's, 40 over par.
Right.
He's going to drop. Like, he's not going to be able to play his best game. He's getting sucked down.
Really? Okay.
And so there's multiple studies that talk about, if you have a group of people and one of them really is sour, that person is not getting lifted up to all of the A player statuses. That person's actually pulling your A players, your B players down. It's drawing them down. And so when they do it in comparison to we were the sum of the 5 people we put ourselves around, a lot of times your team can only be as good. And this is based on personality. This is not based on performance. This is exactly what you said. It's based on their personality. If this is who they are as a person, their cup is always half empty and the sky is always falling.
Right.
Those are just hard to be around. And when everyone struggles to be in the same room as that person, they're going to dodge them. They're going to avoid them. You're going to avoid them. Oh my gosh. There's been many people where I've literally seen them in the break room or the canteen, and I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's really interesting, those studies, because, it's something I've broken down for my children, my teenager, like, hey, look, be mindful. If someone is really not, if someone's just not at the same level as your rest of your friends, maybe they're dark.
Yeah.
They're angry all the time.
Yeah.
You don't have to abandon them. Don't be mean to them, but you don't have to spend all your time with that person and let that person draw you down. We tell that to our kids. And it's so interesting as we say things to our children. And a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn, I see it so often. People talk about like, why are we posting things about family life? But the reality is there's no difference. Like replace this child, replace my daughter with my coworker.
It's the same thing.
Deborah in accounting needs, actually we don't have Deborah in accounting, so I can say that.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Deborah in accounting is struggling because, this person is bringing them down. Okay, Deborah, stay away from them.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. I see you. I hear you. Stay away from them as much as you can.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Well, and on the flip side, it's correct too, right? Because you could have a bunch of people who are, I mean, because we're talking about optimist versus pessimist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have a team versus full of pessimists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get one optimist in there, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's like,
What did I get myself into?
Who is this person?
Yeah.
And why are they, and it again, it's just a personality mismatch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to the personalities, right? It could just be that everybody's perception of somebody else's personality is subjective, right? So
That's a huge point right there. I think you should say that again.
Oh, I wish I could say, I just spit it out, but everybody's perception of somebody else's personality is subjective, right?
Yes.
So you and I could have talking about the same person, and I could think they're an A+ personality, and you could think they're a C+ personality for whatever reason. It's just our preference.
That's right.
Right. And I think the magic is getting all of the people, is grouping the people together as it makes sense, who have similar personalities to do a one common goal, because they're all going to have a similar way to communicate, versus you have the room of pessimists, and then you throw me in there, the eternal optimist. And then, let's say that, and here's the example I can think of. Okay. In risk management, you probably want to have some people who think on the bad side of things, right? Like, okay, what could go wrong? How could it go wrong? How bad could it be? And you'll get me in there. It'll be fine. We'll get there. We'll handle it, and maybe that's not the mentality they need to have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. You do need someone who can see and think through. Risk management is very interesting because, I always tell every project manager, you got to be able to put on the hat of doom and gloom.
Sure.
When you fill this out of your risk registry, but that's okay. You have to be able to do that. You need it.
That's why all types of personalities are required.
But then you also have to, flip the script. Like, you're the eternal optimist. I try to be. I really do try. That's my goal, is to see the world as good. Yeah. Everyone's trying their absolute best. That's what I say all the time, which annoys a lot of people. I believe everyone's trying their absolute best.
Yeah.
Because that's an easier belief.
Right.
And you have to have that person too in that scenario who can say, okay, exactly what you said. We'll get to it. We'll get through. Like, we won't die. We'll survive. We'll work our way through it. Mm-hmm. You have to have the person. I wouldn't even call him the eternal optimist in that scenario. You just have someone who has grit, which I think is really what Gary Vaynerchuk is talking about with that A+ personality.
Sure.
Is someone who, maybe they're not an eternal optimist. They're actually probably more so someone who can just see everything is a hurdle, and we can survive. Yeah. Like, it's the definition of confusion. Like, when people get to a set point and they're confused about something, most people turn and walk away.
Yeah.
But you have to enter a state of confusion on anything to actually learn something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting. I've been chewing on this for the past few days, is that people who are comfortable in confusion are people who are high in grit. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they quit.
Yeah.
They walk away. It's not for them. This is too much for me.
Right.
I need help. I need someone else to take this off my plate. However you want to package that sentence, the reality is they just don't have the grit, or they're not interested.
So the caveat I'll put there is that I feel like, and here's the eternal optimist, right? I feel like everybody has that grit. It's just they don't have the interest, right? Like, for example,
that's the last thing I said, if they're not interested,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a true point.
So everybody, I think, is very interested and gritty about something. It may just not be work, So
how true is that?
Do
you love accounting?
Yeah, and that's why I don't do accounting. That's why I have an accountant.
Exactly.
Like, that's why.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, right? Yeah. It's. I was talking to my friend Vinay the other day. He and I are doing a show also, and he was saying that you find your strength and you find your passion by identifying the thing that you love to do that everybody else thinks is work. Mm-hmm. Right. And so to that end, so many people have so many different interests, and you may just not find it at work. Right. Like, let's say, a person at work, he's, maybe not great at XYZ thing. He's a B-level player at everything. Right. He's good, great personality, whatever, but he's just not really super skilled at A, B or C thing. Right. You find out, oh man, this guy's a tremendous cook. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, there's his grit. That's his thing, and I feel like just everybody has that. Mm-hmm. It may not be at work.
Yeah. Honestly too, that's a big piece for me when I talked earlier about finding people where they are, is finding what is their passion.
Yeah.
Most people don't work in their passion.
Right.
They work in what's mildly acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you have that passion to connect with them on, I've learned about so many other topics as a leader that I would never go and learn about just to try to connect with the team members.
Yeah.
That's going to come up in the lies of leadership as well. But I think that's a big deal. You hit a very big nail there. Is not everyone is going to have the same passion as you.
Right.
Not everyone's going to be as interested in these topics. But how do we motivate them?
Right.
Because I've seen it so many times. I've met so many people, and I beat up on accounting and I joke about accounting. I've rolled out many accounting-based softwares.
Sure.
That's why a lot of people in the accounting departments, they're not in love with accounting. They like numbers.
Right.
They like math. They like principles and rules, but they don't necessarily want to talk about accruals when they go to the bar with you.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. I've met some who do. They're a special breed of monkey.
If you ever go to those bars with them, don't call me.
Okay. Yeah, it's fine. But it's like this though. Circling back to a point that you made earlier. So, you have employees or team members or however you want to say that, there's, they want to talk about their garden or what seeds they're planting or whatever. And they just want to talk your ear off about that. And it's like, hey, they're only 8 hours in a day, right? We need to get this thing done. I've got a meeting in 20 minutes. Boom. Right. So setting that expectation that, okay, I can't talk about this for 3 hours right now. But I think, and it sounds like you already do this, right? So I'm kind of highlighting this, but you come back later and in a different scenario, it's like, okay, I want to know about this. I can't know about this at this exact moment. But hey, you want to go to lunch tomorrow and let's talk seeds. All you want to talk about seeds, boom, I got all the time for you.
Absolutely.
And if, as a leader, if you make time to do that and be honest, like, look, I don't know anything about seeds. Why is this so interesting? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful here. I don't know. Or, whatever it is, you get into their passion, and you understand, it just helps you understand how they tick. And then part of that is that person needs that outlet, right? And maybe they're not able to show you that they're an A player at work or whatever. And that's maybe bothering them subliminally, but they do have this thing that they're really good at. And they want to tell you about it because they want you to see that I have grit. I'm just really not great at the things that we're doing here, and it's subliminal. You may not think about it in that way, but everybody wants to shine, right?
It might also be the clues that you need to know that, so maybe that person's a gardener. And so this is why they are trying their hardest to leave early every day.
Yeah. Because
they're trying to get to their garden, So maybe that clues you in that, hey, you have someone who needs to come in early. Maybe you should ask that person.
Yeah.
Or you have someone they're a coach of their kids' little league, or soccer.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Practice starts at 4.
And practice starts early. So they're the team player to ask, come in early, to knock out these things so that they can get out, that you can help them get out, or they're the team player that can cover a customer visit last minute through lunch,
right?
Because they're not taking lunch, because they don't take lunch, because they leave early every day. That's allowing people to find their strengths and find their shine. In there. And I think that's a brilliant point. I'm glad you brought that up because oh my gosh, the number of times we went to lunch, like, I didn't know there were that many breeds of cat. Guess what? A cat's a cat to me. I'm a dog guy. So, I didn't know that. I thought some just came out white and some came out orange. Like I didn't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's a thing.
Yeah,
so.
It is. And so making that space, creating that zone for them, the return on that investment, I mean, even you bought the lunch, the return on the investment.
For sure.
Is decades long.
Yeah.
It really is. That's what's interesting is I was also thinking about the fact that most of these people, when I said most of these people are in jobs that they just mildly can put up with, it's not their passion.
Right.
Is the other part of building that team mentality and focusing on the whole individual of an employee, you can create a space. I can't name a company that I work for that I didn't actually love the people that I worked with. I didn't always like what I was doing. Most of the time I didn't like what I was doing. I actually love what I do now, and I love the people I work with.
Right.
I'm in a very weird spot that I feel like I actually said to someone the other day, I actually thought when people posted about these things or said these things online, I just always assumed they were bold-faced liars.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah.
you could be happy in what you do, enjoy it, and enjoy the people. I thought it was just the best of luck was to enjoy the people. But the reality is, I think that's why it's a fundamental step to build and focus on that type of footprint for your team and for the people, because that actually makes it work. I mean, we say this, you've heard it so many times. You spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your family.
Yeah.
8 hours a day. I know very few people who only put in 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
With their coworkers, because they get there a few minutes early. They go out for drinks afterwards. They have lunches, or they take customers to dinner.
Right.
They're actually putting in more than 40 hours a week for their job. Most people, in some way, shape, or form. And so finding a way to connect that and build that team trust and that team connection, it's got so many different avenues that we could probably pick apart for hours.
Oh, certainly.
As to why that's actually quite critical. And it's definitely more important than them loving every aspect of their job.
Right.
Truthfully.
Yeah. Well, and I think, finding ways to be able to connect to those folks who, because like you say, that, just from a strict probability standpoint, right? If you take this just like a math problem,
numbers,
the chances of everybody in the office loving their job and also being an A+ player are almost impossible, right?
What are we talking? 2%?
Yeah, maybe. I'll put it in ChatGPT later and get an actual number.
Yeah,
but no,
because chat will know.
Yeah, exactly. But no, the thing is though, it's like, a lot of times you'll find that people, it's like they're passionate about something and they're good at something, and those times they don't intersect. And not to devolve into other examples, but I mean, the fact is that you can. People a lot of times when they're doing something at work, they do that work because it's the highest utilization of their time, per dollar they can make, right? So, they can make a lot of money being a project manager. They can't make a lot of money being a gardener, right? So
it's true,
and that's, I mean, you have to make that. I mean, that's a normal part of life. I wish it wasn't.
Yeah.
I wish you could just go out and chase your passion and do whatever you want and money wasn't a problem, but it is.
Yeah.
So, having, I guess, some sensitivity to that too for everybody and just understanding where they're at, I think that's super important. I think that maybe even the theme of this podcast or this particular episode is just, get with your people, understand your people.
Yeah.
Right. Understand yourself. Right. And then understand your people too, and, I guess just do the best you can to try to respect where they want to go, what their strengths and weaknesses are, if they want to fix them, right? Because some people don't.
That's right.
Right. And if they want to fix them, hey, let's put them on that track and really do all that you can for those folks. Because at the end of the day, we've talked about it all morning that you couldn't do it yourself, right? You can't go out there and turn all the gears by yourself and do all of the reporting that needs to happen and do all the cleanup and do all of the XYZ, or insert whatever software. You can't develop every single piece of it by yourself instantly. So you need these other people. So, just recognize that and just try to help everybody get to where they want to go.
That's right. I think the ability to make that decision that, and honestly, what's after better?
I don't
better.
know. Yeah. More.
So
yeah.
when you make that decision that you want to try to be the best and you want to be better than you were yesterday, that's why I started there with that statement is when they make that decision as the leader or as a team member, you are on that path. The first thing is that decision. And then exactly what you said. So let's sit down. Let's have those conversations. Start with the foundations, understanding your employees where they are. And something we touched on that we didn't really get into is the fact that it's okay if the entire organization isn't on the same trajectory.
Right.
Like you can have your own leadership style in your own department, in your own group. And I've proven this theory over a dozen times. It doesn't have to be the entire vision of the entire company because the real chances that happen are unfortunately small. And I've actually had more than one CEO tell me that it's just not possible to actually care about each individual to the level that I'm describing because it's not scalable. But the reality is it is scalable. Otherwise you wouldn't have companies like Simon Sinek's company.
Right.
Like you wouldn't have these different, organizations that have doubled, quadrupled their value by going through these type of programs. It is scalable. And even if you don't think it's scalable, I always go back to the leader of Savannah Bananas. You do the unscalable until it is scalable.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of his mantras, because he's got a few that are just bangers, that
Right.
just really hit. Like you say it, it's so easy to say, and you guys go home and write it down, and like, all right, wait, hang on.
Yeah.
I got to take my shoes off for this one. But that's exactly right. Is you've made that decision. Here's the foundational start, is the conversations. And I think as we go forward and we kind of talk a little bit about some of those key attributes that go into it and build into it, and then we can roll that into what that looks like in culture and ownership. It's not a one-time light switch flip.
Right.
And you're signing on to do the work.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because if you think about it from this perspective, if anyone said, what kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to live a normal life? Do you want to be average? Or do you want to be extraordinary?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know many people that actually tell me they want to be normal.
Right.
Most people want to be extraordinary. They want to live that type of life. And making that decision, you're signing on for it.
Right.
You're signing on for those moments. And as a team member and as a leader, that's what you're signing on for. The minute you tell me you want your team to be better than they were yesterday, or you want them to be the best, that's what you signed up for. So that means that it's time to do the homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan Hamlin, been a good episode. Thank you for coming out today.
Absolutely.
And it won't be the last time.
No, it won't, JP. Thanks so much, man. This is lovely. Absolutely appreciate you.
Yeah, awesome. Talk soon.
Talk soon.